Alrighty, so this will begin. This is March 17th, video 1 for APUSH history. This is going to begin our first day of our hiatus video notes. Just know, guys, we're going to do the best we can. What I'm going to end up doing is for every week, try to post the corresponding PowerPoint. So I know the video on this is not great, but you can also access the PowerPoint. Just kind of watch the PowerPoint as I talk. I suggest doing that whenever you're doing the notes. Try not to let you get yourself behind. You don't want to have days where you go by where you skip notes, because the more you do that, the more you get behind, the less likely you are to do the notes. So don't let that happen. Try to get this done. I'm going to try to keep the notes as quick as possible as well, too. That way it kind of saves me time. And so that way, since you're doing your own, you can just kind of pause and go back the way you want to. I'm going to kind of do it John Green style. But please, if there's an issue, if you need to give me notes about how I'm doing the notes, if I need to do better or do something different, please email me. I'll try to make adjustments for the next day or the next time. I can't give you any grades or anything right now. All I can do is hope that you will not throw away your entire semester, almost 2 semesters worth of information, and not be prepared for this test. Because as far as you know, College Award is going to be moving forward. So we're going to pick up from where we left off from March 13th. On March 13th, we were talking about modern republicanism. I think both classes were in there. I'm going to kind of recap real fast, and I don't know, where y'all stop, but we'll go forward from there. So modern republicanism is the platform for Eisenhower in the 50s whenever he's president. He wanted to be a fiscal conservative and with the priority of balancing the budget after all the deficit spending going on under Truman and FDR. And he also wanted to do liberal government treatment when it came to people. So it's being conservative when it comes to money, and then being liberal when it comes to people. So he was a moderate on domestic issues. He accepted the New Deal programs as a reality of modern life, meaning he doesn't try to destroy them, because he's the first Republican since Hoover to take over office. He even extended Social Security to 10 million more citizens. Minimum wage was raised, and he also spent money on public housing. So he also had federal funding spent on public housing, which I think all the classes we cover that in too. So he's conservative in the sense that he tries to cut spending. He does balance the budget. He actually cuts military spending. But he's liberal in the sense of people when he tries to expand money to Social Security, minimum wage, public housing, those kind of things. So all that should be a recap, I think, for most folks. He also creates a new cabinet department called the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. So he also creates the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare under Averta Culp Hobby. This is a picture in her picture's in this PowerPoint, but Averta Culp Hobby is the first Republican female to head this department. This department doesn't exist anymore. Health, Education, Welfare has been split to now Health and Human Services and Department of Education, but it was made under Eisenhower initially. He also opposed ideas of federal health care insurance, so he was against federal health care insurance, and he was against federal aid to education. So those are two big Truman things that he's against, which were he was against federal health care insurance, and he was against federal aid to education. His balanced and moderate approach got moderate Republican. He got a moderate Republican title as a result of this approach that he took to governing. Okay. Interstate highway system. This is probably Eisenhower's biggest legacy, and this should also be new for everybody, no matter what class you're in. This is his biggest impact, and actually a gigantic jobs program. The most permanent legacy Eisenhower leaves behind is the interstate highway system in 1956, where he and Congress passed the Interstate Highway and Defense Act. It ended up, not all at one time, but it ended up creating 42,000 miles of interstate road, consisting of all major cities, connecting all major cities. So all major cities, as you know, like Baton Rouge has I-12, I-10, I-110. Like every major city has connections with interstate, and so it helps better connect the interstate. He was inspired by what he saw in Europe whenever he was fighting in World War II, like the Autobahn in Germany and those kind of things, where the roads help better interconnect. So he lays out this gigantic 42,000-mile interstate system over several years. It becomes a model for the rest of the world. This will also give justification for new taxes that they'll pass. They'll pass new taxes for like fuels and tires and vehicles. But the road itself is not just to help connect people; it's also a way to help in the Cold War. Which is why it's called a National Highway and Defense Act. It's a way to also protect cities in case of an emergency. There has to be an evacuation. You have the interstate to get people in and out very quickly. Troops can obviously come near the roads as well too. So this was a gigantic public works program that created thousands of jobs. It also promoted trucking, which that's a big shift too. Now, because trucking becomes a lot easier, you can drive a truck any time of day you want now with interstate highways. That means railroads take a big hit. This is like the last time we're going to talk about railroads, but railroads, this will kind of be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of railroads, because as of the 50s, now you can travel the country in either your own vehicle or ship goods in a truck, like 18-wheeler. And so railroads are going to decline as a result of this because people don't need to use them as shipping as much anymore. It also helped accelerate the growth of suburbs. I would also have that now too, that now that there's easier access to suburbs. Think about like, for interstates for Zachary and Baker, interstates for like Gonzales and Denham Springs and, Ascension Parish and West Side with like Port Allen and all these different places. More people live in those areas now because they can access it because of interstate highways. So that's something to also keep in mind too, is that it does help to grow the suburbs in this post-World War II time period. It also helped contribute to a more homogeneous national culture. It also helped contribute to a more homogeneous national culture, meaning that just kind of like radio and movies you did in the 20s, interstate highways helped to bring us together more as a people and more as a country. There's more emphasis now on cars, trucks, highways, and so forth, but some of the negative aspects is obviously more pollution, more traffic, railroads are hurt, environment is also hurt too from pollution and overbuilding and so forth. All right, 1950s prosperity. So Eisenhower's domestic legislation was very modest. He doesn't try to push a big agenda on the fact that he passes the National Highway Program. The country enjoyed a very steady growth rate of the economy. Our inflation was also very low in the 50s too. So our inflation was also about 1.5%. So overall, everybody did very well in this time period for the most part, except for people living in urban areas and who were living in poverty. The federal deficit fell as well because of them doing the balanced budget. So federal deficit came down as well. Between 1945 and 1960, the per capita disposable income of Americans more than tripled. So which means people had more money to spend doing whatever they wanted to do. So between 1945 and 1960, the per capita disposable income of Americans more than tripled. The post-war economy gave the U.S. the highest standard of living in the world at that point. So in the 1950s, America enjoyed the highest standard of living in the world at that time. All right, the election of 56. Not much to say here. We already kind of saw the map. But Eisenhower had suffered a heart attack in 55, a year before the election, and had surgery. The Democrats tried to use that against him and question his health for a second term. At this point, he was the oldest president that the country had seen. That's now Donald Trump, but at that time he was in his upper 60s. But 4 years of peace and prosperity made Ike very popular again, and then Democrats picked Adlai Stevenson again to run against Eisenhower, and then Eisenhower wins in a landslide pretty much again. You can see here that it was bigger margins all around, but in 55 and 56 he beats Stevenson with no real problems in general. This is Adlai Stevenson, by the way. This is him right here. This is Nixon, and then Eisenhower's in that top corner. So Eisenhower won by even larger margin as a result in 56, and so that's pretty much all I'll say about that election. All right, looking now at Eisenhower and the Cold War, looking at his foreign policies. Most of Eisenhower's attention was put on Cold War issues. His experience as a diplomat and as a general helped shape Eisenhower. And the guy he puts as Secretary of State is going to have a lot of influence too, John Foster Dulles, and you do want to be aware of his name. So John Foster Dulles is going to help guide a lot of our Cold War policies in the 50s, and Eisenhower is going to defer to a lot of him in terms of influence because he was a very experienced diplomat. So let's talk about John Foster Dulles. Dulles was very critical of Truman's containment as too passive. So Dulles was too critical of Truman's containment as too passive. He wanted a new look at a way to challenge the Soviets and the Chinese now that they're both two strong countries. And that phrase, new look, is something you want to be aware of. It sometimes gets referenced. So you can put, like, in quotations, Eisenhower's new look foreign policy or Dulles' new look foreign policy. The way new look is a phrase you do see show up. So he pleased a lot of conservatives with his new policy of brinkmanship. That's usually the term you see associated with Dulles and with Eisenhower in the 50s is brinkmanship. Instead of being kind of passive, he basically says, look, if you attack or you try to influence some area of ours, or you try to influence an area that we protect, meaning like another country, we're going to bring you to the brink of war. We're going to basically we're not going to slowly escalate our retaliation. We're going to go 90 to nothing. We're going to basically promise to attack you with full-out military force, including nuclear bombs. So the mentality here was that we're going to just threaten you with all-out force if you don't listen to what we say or stay out of the areas we don't want you to go to, and we'll bring you to the brink of war and basically threaten to use nuclear force right off the bat. No escalation. We're going to blow you off the planet. So this would bring commies to the brink of war with nuclear weapons, and they'd back down due to U.S. superiority when it came to nuclear weapons. So that was the mentality. We're so much more powerful and so much better that they're not even going to want to mess with us, because we'll basically blow them apart if they don't back off. And the mentality here was that that it creates a deterrence. That's a phrase you want to be aware of too. That you're trying to scare the other people to not react. So it's deterrence. You're trying to deter them by threatening all-out nuclear force and all-out retaliation. Eisenhower prevented him from carrying out more radical, extreme ideas, because at some point Dulles even talked about intervening in countries that were already communist. But Eisenhower is basically like, we're only going to protect the countries that we already influence, not countries that are already that are already communist. We're going to leave those countries alone. So This also brings up this idea of massive retaliation. That Dulles wanted greater reliance on nuclear weapons and air power, spending less money on conventional forces. So this is a big shift under Eisenhower, that one of the ways they saved money on the budget in the military is that they're going to cut a lot of spending for the traditional forces like Army and Navy and spend more on nuclear weapons and more on air power, like more weight. Basically, if you're going to threaten to use nuclear bombs and that's it, then just spend money on that. You'll need to have money spent on traditional Army and Navy and everything else. All right, so we're going to stop the first video there.